Good morning. Thank you for watching Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Putnam. I am thankful to all news resources and my team. Following are the news which have been reported by American, European, Canadian, Australian, Asian, and African channels, and of course, news agencies, AFP, AP, and writers. Now the headlines. US Supreme Court credibility in question. Lyme disease and its long-term effects. American lives have reshaped after reversal of Roe versus Wade decision of Supreme Court. Iranian president and its foreign minister helicopter has crashed in northern Iran. Israeli bombing killed 27 people yesterday in Gaza. National Security Advisor Jack Sullivan is in Israel talking with Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Biden addressed the students in Atlanta. Oldest person in space. Argentinian president insulted Spanish Prime Minister's wife. France sent police reinforcement to Pacific Ocean French territory, New Caledonia. European far-right leaders gathered in Madrid before EU elections. 550 people were arrested in Australia for domestic violence. Now the news in detail.
On this Sunday night, Iran's president is missing. The frantic search effort after a chopper crash in the mountains. The regime's reaction and its future. Long weekend tragedy on an Ontario lake. The deadly boat crash that's claimed 3 lives. Charged with guarding VIPs.
Are you proud of what you do? You proud of your work?
Global News is there as an elite RCMP squad faces their final exam.
My behavior in that video is inexcusable.
Diddy breaks his silence. The music mogul's disturbing admission.
Global National with foreign answer.
This is video shot by the Iranian Red Crescent Society showing its field crews responding to an emergency in the mountains of northwestern Iran. That's where tonight a frantic rescue effort is underway after a helicopter carrying the leader of the country, President Ibrahim Raisi, went down in severe weather. The Iranian state media and officials being very guarded about the fate of the country's leader, except that millions of people have been told to come out and pray for a positive outcome. Good evening and thank you for joining us. The Iranian president, a hardliner who was touted as a potential successor to the country's supreme leader, was returning from neighboring Azerbaijan when the helicopter carrying him and his foreign minister suffered a hard landing. Ibrahim Raisi was instrumental in the recent crackdown against protesters demanding freedom for women in Iran. Tonight, even with the news of Raisi's fate uncertain, critics of the regime aren't mincing their words. Masih Alinejad, a prominent critic, tweeting, "I think this is the only crash in history where everyone is worried if someone survived." Redmond Shannon reports on the frantic search effort for Iran's head of state.
Search and rescue teams trying to find Iran's president and the country's foreign minister. Their helicopter crashed somewhere in a remote part of northern Iran. President Ebrahim Raisi is seen here inside the helicopter. With him on the right, Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian. They had been part of a delegation visiting 2 dam projects on the border with Azerbaijan and meeting with their Azeri counterparts. According to officials, the men were traveling in a convoy of 3 helicopters to the city of Tabriz when one aircraft went down in the Iranian province of East Azerbaijan. Iranian state TV initially reported the event as a hard landing, later saying it was a crash due to poor weather. Raisi is second in command in Iran, below Ayatollah Khamenei. The supreme leader said he hopes that God will return the men, but he assured Iranians there will be no disturbances in the country's affairs. Raisi is a former Chief Justice and Attorney General of Iran. He was dubbed the Butcher of Tehran after being implicated in the execution of thousands of political prisoners in 1988. Canada and other countries have classified those events as crimes against humanity. The hardliner cleric was elected in 2021. He presided over the months of protests that followed the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini after her arrest for wearing her headscarf improperly. And just last month, Iran launched its first direct missile attacks on Israel.
All the major decisions of state, particularly when it comes to regional policy and foreign policy, are taken by the supreme leader and his advisors, really. But the president has an important role in day-to-day governance.
Raisi's government appears to be unpopular within Iran, although it is always difficult to gauge in a country where opposition voices are so strongly suppressed. His presidential term runs until next year.
And Redmond, if Raisi has died or has been incapacitated, what do we know about what happens next in Iran?
Well, Farah, in that case, an interim leader would be appointed, likely the vice president. An election for a new president would then be held within 50 days. Farah?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thank you, Redmond. 63-year-old Ibrahim Raisi, like all of Iran's leaders, is a hardline cleric and a fierce critic of the West. 1 year after ascending to the presidency, he ordered the enforcement of Iran's hijab law. Within weeks of that ruling, Mahsa Amini, a young Kurdish woman, was dead after being arrested for not properly wearing her head covering. Raisi's hardline stance goes back decades. In the 1980s, as a young prosecutor, he sat on a panel that approved the execution of hundreds of political prisoners in arbitrary trials that lasted just a few minutes. At least 35 people are dead after an apparent Israeli airstrike leveled a house located inside a refugee camp in central Gaza. According to witnesses, the blast happened about 3 in the morning at the refugee camp housing displaced Palestinians in central Gaza. Rescuers are digging into the rubble, searching for those missing. There are signs of widening fractures within Israel's wartime coalition. War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz threatened to step down if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu fails to adopt an agreed post-war plan for Gaza. In a televised address on Saturday, Gantz set a June 8th deadline for a blueprint to achieve 6 strategic goals, including bringing hostages home, dismantling Hamas rule, and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip. He also is calling for the establishment of a multinational civilian administration for the Palestinian territory. The ultimatum comes just days after another War Cabinet member threatened to quit over Netanyahu's war strategy.
It's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. That's why I've called for an immediate ceasefire. An immediate ceasefire to stop the fighting. Bring the hostages home.
As you heard, the U.S. president called out the humanitarian crisis in Gaza today, describing a heartbreaking situation during a commencement speech at Morehouse College in Atlanta. Speaking before the historically black all-male college, Biden was largely uninterrupted by jeers or protests that have shut down other college campuses elsewhere across the U.S. over the administration's support for Israel. There is some tragic news out of Ontario now after a deadly boating incident at a lake near Kingston. Last night, 3 people in their 20s died. 5 others are in hospital. Police are still investigating what happened. Lexi Benedict has more on what we know so far. Lexi.
Farah, Ontario Provincial Police tell us the crash happened just after 9:30 on Saturday evening. 2 boats collided in the Bucks Bay area of Bob's Lake, just north of Kingston. Police say many people were still in the water when first responders arrived on scene, but the total number of people involved is still unknown.
We had police from numerous OPP detachments, Marine units from the OPP, Central Frontenac and South Frontenac Fire and Rescue were there with their boats. We had our emergency response team, K9, Frontenac County paramedics were there.
Officials say the boats involved have been described as an open-bow fishing-style boat and a speedboat. Police have not yet released any names, but say the dead are a 21-year-old and 22-year-old woman from South Frontenac and Elginburg, and a 23-year-old man from South Frontenac. Those injured are from the ages of 21 to 44 and were taken to hospital with a range of injuries. 1 was airlifted. Some businesses around the lake have taken to social media to express their condolences. This campground posting, "Our hearts are deeply saddened by the tragic boating accident on Bob's Lake last night. Our thoughts are with the families of these young men and women and all those affected by this tragedy." Ontario Provincial Police are continuing to investigate with help from their collision reconstructionists as well as the Office of the Chief Coroner. But at this time, the circumstances leading up to the crash remain unknown as police continue to search for answers. Farah.
Lexi Benedict in Toronto. Thanks, Lexi. A mix of positive and disheartening updates in Western Canada's wildfires. In BC, officials say 10 properties were impacted by the fire near Fort Nelson, with 4 homes lost to the flames. But forecast rain is helping firefighters make some progress. Preparations are underway regarding a re-entry plan for essential services. And in Manitoba, nearly 700 Cranberry Portage residents are returning home today after a forest fire nearby forced them to evacuate. The blaze is now under control, and despite damage to infrastructure, all of the town's properties have survived. We're getting an up-close look tonight at the work that goes on behind the scenes to protect VIPs in Canada. The recent shooting of Slovakia's Prime Minister has brought the issue of protecting public figures back in the spotlight. Our Mercedes Stevenson was recently given an exclusive look at how the RCMP is working to thwart the threat of political violence.
Assignment, PPO.
They're aiming to be the newest recruits in a specialized unit. These men and women from across Canada are about to take their final exam to graduate as RCMP protective policing officers. After today, they will stand in harm's way as close protection details, charged with guarding the lives of anyone from high-profile prime ministers to visiting foreign dignitaries. Today, it's a fictional VIP, including fictional but hostile waiting media that the officers in training have to try and control.
Everybody can have their shot, but I will ask everybody if they could stay behind.
He's going there. I'm live at the Museum of Nature.
Take a breather, calm and collected, and make smart decisions.
Here she comes!
The site now secure, I'm ushered in as the VIP, surrounded by officers on their final test.
If you have a question for Mercedes, please stand up.
Yeah, just want to say hi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
I have a question too. Are you proud of what you do? You proud of your work? That little piece you did on companies that send light armored vehicles to Saudi Arabia. Now I lost my job. Enough of that crap, you Pacific. Whoa! Get your hands off here.
We get that in real life too, so mine is the protective detail.
Alright guys, so what was the big difference on that one? Sweet line between like his opinion and then his emotion in there, and that now like the reaction time becomes really too close. I would agree with you. I think that right as soon as he's starting to creep closer and closer, then like the risks are increasing. Mercedes, hi. Did you fail through the scenario?
I've seen tons of protective details and it was very impressive.
That's our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stevenson, reporting. Up next, Diddy faces the music, coming up from denial to admission. The hip-hop mogul speaks out after mounting backlash. The news continues on Global National. In Indonesia, several villages around Mount Ibu have been ordered to evacuate after the active volcano erupted once again yesterday evening. Dramatic new images show the volcano spewing lava and ash 4 kilometers high, with lightning sparking around the crater as well. Now, it's unclear how many people have had to flee, but authorities previously recommended clearing a 7-kilometer radius around Ibu. Indonesia's geological agency already raised the alert level over the volcano to its highest on Thursday after a series of eruptions that began more than a week ago. To the civil unrest in New Caledonia now, French forces have launched a major operation to restore order after violent clashes killed at least 6 people there. New Caledonia is a French territory situated in the South Pacific off Australia's eastern coastline. The civil unrest has erupted in the territory's capital. French forces are trying to regain control of a road linking Noumea to the main international airport. French military planes have been landing at Canadian airports during the weekend operation. Heidi Petracek reports on the volatile situation.
French forces are removing barricades and debris from the main road linking New Caledonia's airport to the capital, after blockades put up by protesters cut off essential supplies like food and medicine and forced the airport to close. Violence and looting erupted in the French territory in the South Pacific last week. 6 people were killed in the clashes.
Demande du président de la République, le Premier ministre a présenté lors du Conseil.
The French government declared a state of emergency, allowing it to ban gatherings and forbid movement on the island. A nighttime curfew has also been imposed. More police arrived by air Friday, the reinforcements meant to restore order. The French military confirms to Global News this A400M Atlas, seen on the tarmac at Vancouver International Airport, stopped in Canada to refuel this weekend, transporting cargo to New Caledonia. The aircraft, typically used by France's Military Air Transport Command, flight tracking shows a stop on the way at Canadian Forces Base Goose Bay in Labrador.
So now there's sort of the staring match.
The riots came after a constitutional change passed in Paris, allowing French citizens who've lived in New Caledonia for at least a decade to vote in provincial elections, sparking anger among Indigenous Kanak people, especially those pushing for independence.
And we're seeing this spill out into a whole bunch of conversations about what's the deal with Kanak autonomy, and again, where's the authority of France to kind of reinstitute and relabel processes from 100 years ago.
There have been calls from both sides for calm. The French government has said the state of emergency would last another 7 days. The unrest has trapped hundreds of tourists on the island. With the airport closed until at least Tuesday, Global Affairs Canada has advised against non-essential travel to the capital. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
To the unrest in the Democratic Republic of the Congo now, the Central African Nation's army says it's foiled a coup against the president, Felix Tshisekedi. The attempted coup began early this morning and reportedly involved armed men disguised as soldiers who attacked the presidential palace and the residence of one of the president's closest political allies. According to Congo's army, the perpetrators, including foreign nationals, have been arrested. 3 people were killed during the shootouts in the capital. The president was only re-elected in December, and there are reports the coup's connected to Congo's self-exiled opposition leader, who soon after the attack posted on Facebook threatening the president. Ahead, curbing teen vaping. Why some say a federal tax on e-cigarettes won't be enough to stub it out. Former rap star Sean Diddy Combs has released a video apologizing for beating his former girlfriend in a Los Angeles hotel in 2016.
My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted.
The assault Diddy previously denied was captured on security camera. These are still frames from the exclusive video obtained by CNN. It shows Diddy throw singer Cassandra Ventura to the floor, kicking her repeatedly and dragging her. Ventura, who performs under the name Cassie, sued Combs last year, accusing him of physical and sexual abuse. They settled out of court. In today's apology video, Combs says that after the attack, he underwent therapy and rehab. Vaping is set to get more expensive this summer thanks to a federal tax increase announced in this year's federal budget. Ottawa says making vaping more expensive means fewer will take up the habit, which health experts warn can result in the same kind of problems plaguing cigarette smokers. But as David Aiken reports, the tax hike may not be steep enough to prevent future generations from getting hooked.
Lovely mango and pineapple.
Marion Burt was an avid smoker until 10 years ago. Then she ordered flavored vapes online and never looked back.
When it arrived, I opened the apple first, and I knew from my first pop that I would never smoke again.
But even she admits she is not the vape industry's target audience.
They should have presented vaping with people like me, with no teeth and a lot of wrinkles, and you bet the kids would lose interest pretty quickly.
But the kids are not losing interest. In fact, 1 in 15 teenagers aged 15 to 19 vaped every day in 2022, with young adults even higher at 1 in 10 vaping every day. The federal government thinks it can reduce vaping use among young people by making it more expensive. Right now, vapes can be purchased for as low as $5. A pack of cigarettes costs $14 to $19. But on July 1st, the price of a vape pod will go up between 12 to 24 cents, depending on where you live. Public health experts say that's too little, too late.
That's really close to inflation over the last few years, so it's not really much of an increase at all.
I think the federal government could go even stronger. They missed the boat 10 years ago when vaping started to be introduced.
But some researchers fear hiking vape costs could push some to get their nicotine fix from smoking cigarettes.
We noticed that the use of conventional cigarettes go up after states adopting electronic cigarette taxes.
The federal government did raise cigarette taxes by $3.72 per pack in the budget.
We do need to increase e-cigarette taxes. We do need to increase tobacco taxes. We can do both.
Helping some, but hooking others. A persistent public health problem with no immediate solutions. David Aiken, Global News, Ottawa.
Next, making waves, meet some of Canada's best swimmers punching their tickets to Paris. And the Canadian Olympic swimming trials wrapped up today. It's where Canada's best swimmers have been competing for a chance to represent our country in Paris this summer, including 17-year-old swimming phenom Summer McIntosh. She's one of Canada's best hopes at finishing on the podium. McIntosh set a new world record in the 400-meter individual medley and thanked the crowd for playing their part.
It was awesome. The crowd was absolutely electric. I just heard all you guys during the 100 breaststroke, and it really kept me going, so thank you.
Meanwhile, 28-year-old Kylie Massey punched her ticket to Paris in the 100 and 200-meter backstroke. This will mark her 3rd Olympic appearance. She's won a bronze and 2 silver medals in previous Olympics.
The swimming world is always progressing, and I want to be fighting at the top, so just continuing to work on every little detail that I can find improvement in.
Annie Alexiak will also swim in Paris, less than a year after undergoing knee surgery. Canada's all-time Olympic medal leader will compete in the women's 4x100-meter freestyle relay.
I'm excited. I think we have a really good team heading into Paris, so I'm just happy to be a part of it now.
And on the men's side, Finley Knox set a national record in the 200-meter individual medley, while Joshua Liendo broke his own Canadian record in the 100-meter butterfly. Both are set to compete in their 2nd Olympic Games. Can't wait to see them all shine at the Olympics. Go Team Canada. And that's Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Farah Nasser, and on behalf of our whole crew here, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your Sunday evening with us. Tonight's Air Canada is the annual Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. Thousands of bikers across the country suited up today to ride around in classic and vintage motorcycles. Their purpose, raising awareness for prostate cancer research and important men's mental health programs. Until tomorrow, take good care of yourselves and take care of each other. Have a good night.
Several developing stories as we come on the air. A helicopter carrying Iran's president involved in an accident. Tonight, a massive search for survivors. Diddy apologizes after a slew of denials. He now admits he beat his ex-girlfriend. And a severe storm threat with the nation's heartland in the crosshairs. We begin with the search for Iran's president and foreign minister. Their helicopter apparently crashing in the mountains. Rough conditions hampering the operation. Iran state media says the helicopter made a hard landing and is calling for prayers. The president, a hardliner, is considered a possible successor to the ruling Ayatollah. Also tonight, Sean Diddy Combs breaks his silence and posts an apology days after this surveillance video exclusively obtained by CNN appeared to show him beating his then-girlfriend. Diddy long denied assaulting her, but now says he's disgusted, calling his actions inexcusable. The nation's heartland braces for a new round of severe storms. Kansas possibly facing winds up to 100 miles an hour. President Biden's message to graduates at Morehouse College, telling them, check my record. The president reaching out as polls show him losing support among young black men. Tonight, videos show some graduates silently protesting that commencement address. Plus, a horrific crash, a high school senior killed just days before graduation. The prosecutor says the other car was traveling at nearly 100 miles an hour over the speed limit. That driver now faces multiple charges. Desperate moments in Ukraine. Thousands are now fleeing the Kharkiv region as Russia intensifies its attacks in the east. Today, an assault on a Ukrainian beach resort killing at least 6, including a pregnant woman. James Longman on the ground in Ukraine. New video captures the moment a propane tank exploded outside a Michigan restaurant. Several victims rushed to the hospital. And America strong tonight. A long time coming. A dream deferred for more than 60 years. Today, the history that was made in space.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday. I'm Lindsay Davis. A massive search is now underway for a helicopter carrying top Iranian officials. The country's president, its foreign minister, and 2 local officials, along with security and crew, were all on board. The officials seen here earlier in the day were on their way back from the Azerbaijan border when their helicopter suffered what Iranian officials initially called a hard landing. State media reported the army and police were ordered to use all available resources in the search for the helicopter, seen here before it went down. For hours, rescuers struggled to reach the missing helicopter. Dense fog and rough terrain hampering their efforts. The White House says President Biden was briefed on the situation, and we've just learned that Russia and Turkey are both helping with the search. ABC's Lama Hassan leads us off from London.
Tonight, the urgent search for the helicopter carrying the Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi and the Foreign Minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian, along with others. Seen here earlier in the day, they were traveling in a convoy of 3 helicopters. Raisi had just inaugurated a dam on the border with Azerbaijan with that country's president. Iranian state media reporting the aircraft they were flying in forced to make a hard landing. The helicopter accident occurring in a mountainous area of northwestern Iran amid treacherous weather conditions. Dozens of search and rescue teams mobilized immediately, fog blanketing the region, slowing their efforts to reach the site. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei calling on Iranians to pray for their safety, saying, "We hope that God the Almighty returns the dear president and his colleagues in full health to the arms of the nation." Many gathering in mosques around the country. Elected in 2021, President Raisi, a hardliner, is the second most powerful figure in Iran, seen as the top contender for replacing Ayatollah Khamenei.
Dense fog hindering the search efforts. Lama Hassan joins us now from London. And Lama, this crash comes as international tensions with Iran have increased in recent months. What happens now?
So, Lindsay, the country's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei trying to reassure Iranians today, saying that there'll be no disturbances in the country's affairs. Lindsay.
Lama, thank you. Here at home tonight, Sean Diddy Combs says he's sorry. The music mogul posted on Instagram today that he takes full responsibility for his actions in that video from 2016, where he appears to hit, kick, and drag his then-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. The statement comes after the LA District Attorney said Combs would not be prosecuted. ABC's Melissa Dunn has the details.
Tonight, Sean Diddy Combs admitting to beating his ex-girlfriend, apologizing 2 days after this disturbing surveillance video exclusively obtained by CNN showed him attacking singer Cassie Ventura at a Los Angeles hotel in 2016, throwing her to the ground and kicking her.
I hit rock bottom. I make no excuses. My behavior in that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video.
In a lawsuit settled last year, Ventura claimed Combs became extremely intoxicated and punched Ms. Ventura in the face, giving her a black eye, adding when she tried to leave, Combs followed her into the hallway, yelling at her and grabbed at her. Combs had previously denied the allegations, his attorney last year calling them offensive and outrageous. Now, the entertainment mogul acknowledging he attacked his then-girlfriend.
I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
Combs releasing the video statement after the LA District Attorney's Office indicated they would be unable to charge Combs as the incident is outside the statute of limitations. Sources telling ABC News Combs is the subject of an ongoing federal investigation out of the Southern District of New York into human trafficking. No charges have been filed against him in the probe. His attorney calling raids of Combs' houses a witch hunt, adding Mr. Combs is innocent and will continue to fight every single day to clear his name. In recent months, Combs has been accused in civil lawsuits of sexual assault and sex trafficking, allegations which he has denied. Now, attorneys for Cassie Ventura responding to Diddy tonight, calling his apology disingenuous, saying it shows his pathetic desperation. Now, for anyone who needs help, it is available. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, that number 1-800-799-SAFE. And Lindsay, the hotline apologizes as it's experiencing longer than usual wait times. Lindsay.
Those hotlines receive more than 20,000 calls daily in the U.S. Melissa, thank you. Tonight, millions in the heartland are bracing for severe weather. And just before we came on the air tonight, tornado sirens blared in Russell, Kansas, where a twister was spotted in the rural community located in the north central part of the state. Let's bring in ABC News meteorologist Samara Theodore. Samara, time this all out for us.
Well, Lindsay, the threat is ongoing tonight. A severe thunderstorm watch has been issued from South Dakota all the way down to the Texas Panhandle. But our eyes right now are really focused on the state of Kansas. There's a potential for a derecho as it sweeps across through Wichita and Manhattan. As we head through the overnight hours, destructive winds up to 100 miles per hour are possible. Tomorrow, thunderstorms will begin to bubble in the afternoon right in the Great Lakes region during the evening commute. But then by tomorrow night, sweeping across Nebraska and Iowa, there we could see a few tornadoes. The threat persists on Tuesday, sweeping eastward into places like Kansas City, stretching from Green Bay to Oklahoma City. Lindsay?
Many on high alert. Samara, thank you. Tonight, President Biden is appealing to a crucial part of his base in a commencement address at historic Morehouse College. The president tried to win over younger black voters, particularly men, a crucial voting bloc. ABC's Selena Wang is in Georgia tonight.
Tonight, President Biden reaching out to black college students.
Many of you graduates don't know me, but check my record.
As he tries to reverse eroding support from black voters, a key block he needs for his re-election. The president delivering the commencement speech at Morehouse, the historically black college for men.
We know black men are going to help us lead us in the future.
The president speaking directly to students for the first time since protests have flared on campuses across the country.
What's happening in Gaza and Israel is heartbreaking.
Students silently protesting the president's handling of the war in Gaza, turning their chairs away from Biden, staying seated during standing ovations, and a faculty member standing with her fist raised. Morehouse's valedictorian delivering a message of his own.
It is my stance as a Morehouse man, nay, as a human being, to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
That's why I call for an immediate ceasefire. I'm working to make sure we finally get a two-state solution.
Morehouse students divided on the president's performance.
It was pretty silent amongst the students. It was a bit eerie. I appreciate the fact that he came to speak at our commencement.
Our latest ABC News Ipsos poll shows 85% of black voters over the age of 50 support Biden, but that number drops to 64% for voters under the age of 50. Meanwhile, Trump picking up a key endorsement this weekend from the National Rifle Association, vowing to roll back gun regulations Biden put in place.
I think my vote will swing for Biden, in a sense, but I really don't know. We'll see what November holds.
And Lindsay, President Biden tonight campaigning in another battleground state, Michigan, then speaking to the NAACP. The president is trying to shore up support with this critical voting bloc that he knows he needs to win the White House again. Lindsay?
Selena, thank you. Out of that tragedy outside Chicago, a suspect is charged in the death of a 17-year-old high school senior just weeks shy of his graduation. On Saturday, a judge ordered him to remain behind bars without bond. Authorities say the suspect was drunk and was going nearly 100 miles per hour over the speed limit. Here's ABC's Morgan Norwood.
Tonight, a beloved high school senior killed and his girlfriend injured by an alleged drunk driver in a horrific car crash just days before prom and graduation. Court documents say dashboard camera video caught suspect Tae-Young Kim driving close to 100 miles an hour over the speed limit, 131 and a 35 mile per hour zone.
There was no screeching at all.
His Mustang allegedly slamming into 17-year-old Marco Nikitич's Mercedes. The fierce impact slicing Nikitич's car in half. The trunk landing in someone's yard, according to court documents.
He went into the left lane, got back in front of me, and then just floored it and turned off his lights, and then about 5 seconds later, I seen the cars in the air.
According to court documents, Kim was drunk and had marijuana in his system. Police also saying they found a bong, rolling papers, a cannabis pipe, and 2 containers with cannabis residue. His attorney speaking on behalf of his family.
Your condolences, as well as Mr. Kim's condolences, goes out to all the victims.
At a crash site memorial, Marco's father, overcome with grief, falling to his knees and kissing a photo of the child he senselessly lost.
He's actually the best guy I ever knew. He should have lived a full life.
And Lindsay, prosecutors say Kim admitted he had been drinking the night of the crash. Tonight, he is facing a number of charges, including aggravated DUI and reckless homicide. Lindsay, he is due back in court on Friday.
Morgan Norwood for us. Thanks so much. Overseas now, Russia's intensifying its push into Ukraine's war-ravaged northeast. At least 6 people were killed and dozens injured outside Kharkiv overnight. Russian strikes have been targeting the region for days, forcing thousands to flee. ABC's James Longman is in Ukraine.
Vladimir Putin says he doesn't want to occupy Kharkiv, but tonight Ukraine's second-largest city is still firmly in his sights. 6 people were killed and 27 injured in a strike today. A nearby lakeside beach resort reduced to this. Among the dead, a pregnant woman. And in the north, more villages are now being evacuated for fear of a Russian advance. 10,000 have now been forced to leave their homes.
Incredibly eerie being here. This village is entirely deserted and all we're hearing is birdsong, the occasional dog, and the sound of distant artillery.
Villagers here fear the destruction Elena has already seen. We find her sheltering under a tree, just rescued from Vovchansk, the epicenter of the fighting.
The situation, if you're on the news, is horrible, just horrible. It's a zombie city.
And now we can even hear the war happening here now. It's getting closer, it feels like.
There is a lot of drones, and we are going like this under peace. You're afraid to go outside. And there is fighting with big artillery from the air, from the like this, from everything.
And the hostilities are intensifying in other parts of the more than 600-mile front line. The Russian tactic perhaps to draw limited Ukrainian resources to Kharkiv and push through in other areas. Lindsay?
James, thank you. Tonight, the first person to receive the Neuralink implant is sharing his story about how the tiny chip has saved his life. 30-year-old Nolan Orbach was paralyzed in a freak accident 8 years ago. Now he can do things he hasn't been able to do since he was injured, and he's hoping for more. Here's ABC's Will Reeves.
Tonight, the first person implanted with Elon Musk's experimental brain chip Neuralink sharing his remarkable story. 30-year-old Nolan Darbaugh is paralyzed from the shoulders down.
You just played some music? Yeah, man. That's awesome.
Now he can play music or chess, use a smartphone, all with just his thoughts. When he was 22, Nolan says he jumped into a man-made lake and sustained a spinal cord injury. His mom is his full-time caregiver.
I didn't have anything to wake up for in the morning, and this has changed that for me.
What can you do now with the chip implanted that you could not do prior?
I can control a computer just like anyone else can.
The chip connects to his brain with threads thinner than a human hair. In recent weeks, some of those threads retracted, affecting his abilities.
We rolled up our sleeves and found various different ways to, for Nolan, be able to recover his performance, which we have successfully been able to do.
Nolan telling me he hopes his story can help inspire others with spinal cord injuries, and that one day paralysis can be reversed.
It's going to be amazing when someone can have a spinal cord injury, go into a hospital, get surgery, and walk out a couple days later. I think it's going to happen. I don't think it's as far away as people might think.
Now, Lindsay, while the Neuralink device won't impact any of Nolan's physical ability, he tells me it has improved his quality of life greatly. And Neuralink tells me that they plan to implant their next 2 participants in their trial in the coming months. Lindsay?
Potential just so fascinating there, Will. Thank you. Former Trump attorney Rudolph Giuliani is expected to be arraigned on Tuesday in Arizona on charges he attempted to overturn the 2020 election results in the state. State officials say Giuliani was served with the indictment on Friday, right after his 80th birthday party. Officials had made several previous attempts to serve Giuliani, who had been taunting the office on social media. There's so much more ahead on World News Tonight this Sunday, including a brazen multi-million-dollar jewel heist and a propane explosion sends several people to the hospital. Next tonight, multiple injuries reported after a propane tank exploded outside a Michigan restaurant. Surveillance video captured the blast Saturday night in Rochester. 5 people were rushed to a hospital, 3 in serious condition. Investigators are looking into what led to the explosion. In Paris, a brazen jewelry heist. Armed robbers on motorbikes forced their way into the Harry Winston store in broad daylight on Saturday, breaking display cases and swiping jewelry before making their getaway. Losses are estimated to be in the millions of dollars. When we come back, a fireball in the sky. What was it? To the Index, and dramatic video of a water rescue. A man dove into the Hudson River to reach a dog that was struggling off Hoboken, New Jersey. The dog's owner telling him to swim beyond the animal and then nudge him back to shore. The rescue took less than a minute. Next, a spectacular sight over parts of Europe. A blue and green fireball streaking through the sky over Portugal and Spain early Saturday morning. The European Space Agency says it was a piece of a comet traveling at close to 100,000 miles an hour. That's 65 times as fast as a fighter jet. It finally disappeared over the Atlantic Ocean. And a lot of horse racing fans may be disappointed. No Triple Crown winner this year. Seize the Gray held off Kentucky Derby winner Mystic Dan on a muddy track to win the Preakness. It was the 7th-time 88-year-old trainer Wayne Lucas has won the Preakness. And when we come back, America Strong, an astronaut makes his long overdue first flight. Finally, delayed but not denied, a flight for the history books.
Today, at 90 years old, retired Air Force Captain Ed Dwight realized his dream. The dream initially deferred after he was selected by President John F. Kennedy back in 1961 to be the nation's first black astronaut.
If politics had changed, I would have gone into space in some kind of capacity. As I look at it philosophically, my role in the whole process was to open up a conversation about life in space, and I was very, very proud of it.
Prouder still this morning as he made history. No longer about breaking racial barriers, today was about breaking the sound barrier, blasting off in West Texas on Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket along with 5 other passengers.
The vehicle continues to climb.
After waiting 63 years, just imagine his delight. 3 minutes, 14 seconds into flight, the rocket reaching its highest altitude at just over 300,000 feet. Captain Dwight finally making it to space, among the newly minted astronauts on board experiencing zero gravity. Astronaut Ed Dwight emerging back on Earth, still floating nonetheless.
Long time coming.
His wife Barbara right there to greet him with a big hug for her husband, now the oldest American to ever go to space.
Overwhelmed by everything you can think of. I thought I really didn't need this in my life, but now I need it in my life. This is fabulous.
Long time coming indeed. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Lindsay Davis. David Muir right back here tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Muir, America's
Breaking news tonight, the helicopter carrying the Iranian president crash landing. His fate still unknown right now. Rescuers racing to make it to the site. Bad weather slowing the surge. The president and key members of Iran's cabinet also on board. What it means for the rest of the region already on edge. Diddy's apology. The music mogul speaking for the first time since that video emerged of him assaulting his then girlfriend.
I hit rock bottom. I make no excuses.
But the DA says he won't be charged. Houston's heat wave emergency. Hundreds of thousands without power after that deadly storm. Long lines for ice and water. The temperatures hitting 90. One-on-one with the CEO of Airbnb. Will there be more stunts like this up house to stay in? And his acknowledgement that prices got too high. Do you think you lost the thread on the value piece of it?
This is NBC Nightly News with Hallie Jackson.
We're coming on the air with developing news out of the Middle East, and no word yet on whether the Iranian president has survived.
That I've ever known. I think if I can even do half of what he's done, I think I'm doing something right.
Looks like they are both doing something right. That's Nightly News for this Sunday. Lester will be back tomorrow. For all of us here at NBC News, I'm Hallie Jackson. Thanks for watching, and have a great week.
Thanks for watching.
Well, exclusive new border numbers obtained by Fox are sparking renewed national security fears. CBP tells us migrants who entered illegally and did not turn themselves in are at an all-time high under President Biden, with more than 1.6 million gotaways in the last 3 fiscal years alone. Now, that's more than the Trump and Obama years combined. In addition, there have been more than 365 people on the terror watch list caught trying to sneak in. Let's bring in Nebraska Senator Pete Ricketts. He serves on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And Senator, the last part of that intro said that the people who are on the watch list, they were caught trying to sneak in. So are we catching most of these would-be criminals, or most of them part of the got away list as well?
Well, that's the problem with this Biden open border policy is that we just don't know. During the Trump administration, there were 14 people on the FBI's terrorist watch list that tried to cross the border illegally and were caught. And Trump brought illegal border crossings to a 45-year low. This administration, as you mentioned, has had hundreds, and that doesn't count the people that are getting across in that 1.4 million you mentioned. And actually, it is just crazy that if you look at all the numbers across the Biden administration, how much more it is than the last 10 years combined in those two administrations. And because they're gotaways, we don't know how many terrorists got in there.
Wow. How do you happen to know how are they physically evading border agents and who's helping them?
Well, this is all being done by the cartels, right? The cartels are being paid to move people or drugs or whatever. And I've been on the border 4 times and talked to Customs and Border Protection folks. And what the cartels will do is they'll take a bunch of folks who are coming here illegally, put them through in one sector, and then take their high-value targets, so maybe people who are terrorists or maybe it's the drugs, and push them through in a different sector where they know we're thin because we have to move the resources around. I mean, the cartels are running this like a highly efficient business. And frankly, this is why the Biden border policies are endangering our country.
So if you were to temporarily close the U.S. southern border, would the cartel still find a way to smuggle illegal immigrants into our country?
Well, let's look at what the Trump administration did. They had the Remain in Mexico policy, and they brought illegal crossings down to a 45-year low. In 2019, when I was governor, there was about 46 pills laced with fentanyl that we took off our highways. By the first 6 months of 2021, that number jumped to 151,000. So while you may not be able to cut it down to zero, we can see that the Trump policies were able to bring the number of people and illegal drugs coming across the border down to very low numbers. And this open border policy has just thrown it all wide open, and that's why we're being flooded, for example, with these illegal drugs.
So then, considering this will remain a crisis for the next 8 months, if Trump were to become president again, what would he do on day 1 to secure the border and cut off the flow of illegal immigrants?
Yeah, well, I haven't talked to the Trump administration, but as I talk to Customs and Border Protection people, they say the single biggest thing we could do to turn this around is re-implement Remain in Mexico. This is the policy where if you're coming to seek asylum in our country, you have to wait for years sometimes in Mexico until you get your asylum hearing. The way it's working right now is that Biden's let everybody into the country, and they're in our country for years waiting for the hearing. And by the way, how many of those people you think actually come back years later to their hearing? Not many.
So is Mexico now totally against the Remain in Mexico policy?
Well, when the Trump administration proposed it to Mexico in the first place, they were against it, but the Trump administration convinced them to be able to implement that policy. The Biden administration could do the same thing, and I'm confident the Trump administration will do it if they're reelected.
So meanwhile, I guess we wait? I mean, is that what we do?
Sadly, that's what we're looking at, is this open border policy that is created by Joe Biden is letting in millions of people. We didn't even talk about the abuse of parole, and is creating a national security, human trafficking, sex trafficking, child trafficking crisis at our southern border. It's a catastrophe, and all of this is directly the responsibility of Joe Biden.
And what about that bipartisan Senate border bill that was in place and just got turned down because basically President Trump, former president, told the Republicans don't pass it. He wants to run on the border issue.
Well, I got to tell you, in the Senate, nobody was voting against that bill because Trump told them to. It was because it was a bad bill. Look, it set the emergency level at 5,000.
Excuse me. Pardon me then. What if it was on the House side? What about that? Somebody was told in Congress to not vote on it because President Trump, former president, didn't want it to pass under Biden.
At the end of the day, it was a bad bill. It set the emergency level at 5,000. 5,000 is a catastrophe. 1,000 is an emergency level. Even Obama, little people admitted that. That's just one of the bad things. It didn't adjust the abuse of parole. It didn't close the loopholes in our asylum system. It was a terrible bill, and that's why it failed in the Senate. In the House, I can't speak to that. I'm not in the House, but I can tell you it was a bad bill.
Okay, so with more than 1.6 million gotaways in the last 3 fiscal years alone, you would think that a bad bill is better than no bill.
Yeah, I would disagree with you on that one. It didn't do anything to address the real problems here. It didn't do anything to implement Remain in Mexico. It didn't do anything to end Biden's abuse of parole. He's paroled 1.2 million people into our country last year. That number, on average, during Trump and Obama was 5,600 people a year. That's just one example of how Biden is continuing to abuse our laws, to subvert our laws, to allow literally millions of people into our country. The bill that was proposed would not do anything to address that.
Senator, with an 8,000% increase of Chinese nationals illegally crossing the southern border in the last 2.5 years, what's the national security implication?
Well, this is huge. This is why I said it was a national security crisis that Biden's creating our border. We'd be naive to think that the Chinese Communist Party is not putting spies and saboteurs in that huge group of people that are coming across. Just a few weeks ago in the San Diego sector, in 3 days, they had more Chinese nationals cross than the entire 2021. So our adversaries, like the People's Republic of China, know we have an open border. And it's not just them. It's also Syrians. It's Iranians. They're coming across our border, and they're going.
I mean, it's alarming.
It's crazy.
Yeah, we're showing pictures. It's a crisis for sure. And I'm running up against the clock, but I want to ask you, because I know you said that bill that was on the table, the Senate border bill, was not sufficient. Then, so can Congress do anything, or we just wait for Biden's failed border policies to just prevail for the next 8 months until
at the end of the
there's
day,
another president, perhaps?
Well, at the end of the day, what we know is that Biden could address this if he wants to. He chooses not to. He has the same tools Trump did when Trump brought it to 45-year low. A real bill that would force Biden to close the border is something that could pass, but the Democrats have not allowed that. They blocked it in the Senate. Because we voted on H.R. 1, for example. Frankly, at the end of the day, the thing we need to do is throw this president out of office.
All right, Republican Senator from Nebraska, Pete Ricketts, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
Tonight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under growing pressure to make post-war plans for the Gaza Strip. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is meeting with him to talk about who will govern the territory when the war ends. Meanwhile, it has been a deadly day in Gaza. CBS's MTS Tayyab joins us tonight from East Jerusalem. MTS, good evening.
Good evening. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet is at risk of falling apart after he rejected a proposal from a top coalition partner for how the war in Gaza should end. The political uncertainty comes as Israel's offensive across the devastated territory intensifies.
One final agonizing kiss goodbye for a small child wrapped in a blood-stained shroud for burial. Just one of 27 Palestinians killed across Gaza today in multiple Israeli strikes. Most were killed overnight in Nusayriya in central Gaza. Yad Harara had to dig survivors from the rubble following the Israeli strike with his bare hands. Their message to us is clear, he says. Just look around you. In the southern city of Rafah, Israel's so-called limited operation there is only widening. The violence has triggered a mass exodus of civilians, including 84-year-old Huria Al-Ghul. It's a displacement which echoes her family's expulsion from the now Israeli city of Ashkelon to Gaza 76 years ago when Israel was founded. Known to Palestinians as the Nakba, or catastrophe, Al-Ghul remembers it vividly. She was just 8 years old at the time and has now lost her home once again. My house was destroyed and now we live in a tent.
Tonight, we celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month with a story of an inspiring maestro who's breaking barriers while hitting all the right notes.
New York's Metropolitan Opera sets the tone as one of the world's most prestigious stages, and conductor Xian Zhang is helping to shape its sound. The groundbreaking maestro made her guest debut earlier this year, one of the first Asian American women to lead from its podium.
Do you hope to inspire other musicians?
Absolutely. In the U.S., only about 1 in 4 music directors are people of color, and even fewer are women.
Do you think it was harder as a woman, as a person of color?
The double standard? Oh, absolutely. I always tell people, if two conductors make the same mistake, if one is a guy, and who can people just go, maybe just an off day, or he just did that. But if it's a woman, or if it's someone of color, they would judge slightly harsher. But to be within this group, one also has to learn how to grow from it and give yourself the space to make mistakes. It's okay.
Experience Zhang passes on while also leading the New Jersey Symphony in her 8th season as its first female music director.
This is such a majestic hall. What is it like to conduct the New Jersey Symphony?
We recently had quite a few sold-out concerts. It's really thrilling.
And as she blazes a new path, Zhang hopes the music itself strikes the highest note of all.
Tonight, President Biden has been briefed on the apparent crash of a helicopter carrying Iran's president near the border with Azerbaijan. For the latest on this developing story, we turn now to CBS's Ian Lee.
Good evening, Nancy. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi's helicopter went down in the northwest of the country. It was part of a convoy of 3 helicopters when it made what officials describe as a hard landing. Iranian state TV showed rescue crews working in heavy fog. Visibility in some places is less than 20 feet. The helicopter went down in a mountainous region. Iran's foreign minister was also traveling with the president at the time. Both are missing. They had been visiting a dam project earlier in the day. Now, Raisi is an extremely divisive president. He was elected in the lowest turnout in the country's history. He's a conservative hardliner who's overseen a violent crackdown on dissent. Raisi is also very close to the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and many view him as possibly his successor. Now, the crash is currently being described as an accident. So far, there isn't any talk of foul play. And Nancy, tonight, the supreme leader is calling on the nation to pray for Raisi while adding that the government will carry on functioning as usual.
Ian Lee, thank you.
Around the world. Every day, France 24 covers all the ground in all 4 corners of the world.
Check out Around the World every afternoon here on France 24.
Iran's Red Crescent says the wreckage of the helicopter of President Ebrahim Raisi has been located after it crashed in bad weather. Rescue teams were near.
Every day, France 24 covers all the ground in all 4 corners of the world.
Check out Around the World every afternoon here on France 24.
Iran's Red Crescent says the wreckage of the helicopter of President Ebrahim Raisi has been located after it crashed in bad weather. Rescue teams were nearing the site. An Iranian official said all passengers aboard are feared dead. France sent in more police reinforcements to the Pacific Ocean territory of New Caledonia in a bid to end a week of unrest. Riots began last Monday over a proposed voting reform that would diminish the voice of the indigenous Kanak population. And Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, is sworn into office in Taipei. He succeeds Tsai Ing-wen, who vehemently opposed China's claims that Taiwan is part of its territory. Lai, also a staunch defender of the island's democracy, though he has recently toned down his rhetoric. Good evening to you. Thanks for joining us here on France 24. We begin with breaking news from Iran, where state media has said the helicopter of President Ebrahim Raisi has been found after it crashed in bad weather. The head of the Red Crescent said the wreckage was located just in the past hour or so as the sun rose in the mountainous Jolfa region. Rescue teams are making their way to the site. Reuters cited an Iranian official as saying the helicopter was completely burned and it's feared all passengers are dead. Among the other passengers aboard was the foreign minister, Hossein Amir Abdullahian. Well, the 63-year-old ultra-conservative President Raisi is seen by some as a potential successor to the Supreme Leader Ali Ayatollah Khamenei, but others feel he was simply appointed to carry out the Supreme Leader's wishes. The only updates on his accent are coming from state media, which sometimes carry conflicting reports, but one thing is certain, according to Huzbe Pasi from the MENA program at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs, Iran will continue to deliver the message of continuity.
One of the important things in any government is to show continuity in government. And especially in the Iranian case, perhaps more than in some of the other Middle Eastern countries, there is an institutional foundation. So it's not like everything is going to collapse because this particular person is dead or incapacitated. And at the same time, he is, of course, he holds a very important office within the system, and he, in particular, himself. So on the one hand, they need to kind of downplay a bit the potential consequences, since we don't even know what has happened. And on the other hand, of course, if the president is dead, that is a huge blow, both to the conservatives, but it is, of course, something that they need to manage, the kind of stage to some degree, popular grief and so on. The fact that they're having an emergency meeting tells us that it is an emergency, whether it's an emergency because they don't know what's going on, what has happened, or because they want to prepare for the worst case scenario. Obviously, it will be this continuity of government. They will basically gather around to make sure that everyone knows what they're supposed to do and hold the peace internally, so to speak, and then prepare for the worst case scenario, which is that they need to hold presidential elections. And if they do that, the question is, how much are they going to stage manage that election? Because when Raisi was elected, they basically removed any potentially serious contender to him.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, Iranian state television has said there are no signs of life at the crash site of President Ebrahim Raisi's helicopter in the Jolfa Mountains in Iran. France 24's international affairs commentator Douglas Herbert tells us how developments could play out in the coming days.
Technically, on paper, right, he was the second most powerful position in Iran after the Supreme Leader, but let's not forget that a lot of power is wielded by the Revolutionary Guards, by the clerical establishment. Now, he was president, but also a member of that clerical establishment. He was a very conservative, a hardliner, a Shiite cleric, and it ran in his family. This was a man who was seen as a successor, a potential successor to the 85-year-old Supreme Leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei. So in that sense, he was politically president, the head of the executive branch of government, which is a little weaker, but than in many other places. He wasn't the head of state. That was Khamenei. In terms of what now, what this would mean, a disruption to the government, when Khamenei says, do not worry, whatever happens, there will be no disruption. You can read, it doesn't take too much of a stretch to mean that in terms of the foreign policy, the main planks of the foreign policy that were developed under Ebrahim Raisi in this presidency, the projection of regional influence, the backing of militant proxies across the region, so on and so forth, even the enrichment of uranium fuel and the ballistic missile program, all of that we can perhaps presume is going to remain pretty much on course, regardless of how this plays out in the hours and days ahead.
Douglas Herbert from our international affairs desk there. For now, we move on to other world news. An Israeli strike has killed at least 31 people in central Gaza, according to Hamas officials. The strike on Sunday reportedly hit a home in the Nusayrat refugee camp. It comes as Israel continues to target resurgent Hamas forces in northern and central areas, as well as in Rafah in the south. As truce negotiations appear to have stalled, United States National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has been visiting the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is facing growing opposition, both internationally and domestically, with Benny Gantz, a key member of his war cabinet, threatening to resign. US President Joe Biden has reached out to young voters in Georgia, telling graduates at Morehouse College in Atlanta that he understands student protesters' anger over the war in Gaza. Biden told the audience at the historically black men's college not to give up on democracy and warned of the dangers posed by his presumptive presidential rival, Donald Trump. This type of campaign visit would usually be rather low-key, but as you can see from these pictures, it sparked protests. It's drawn much more student scrutiny after nationwide demonstrations at universities calling for divestment from Israel. Take a listen to Biden.
I support peaceful nonviolent protest. Your voices should be heard, and I promise you I hear them. It's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. That's why I call for an immediate ceasefire. An immediate ceasefire, stop the fighting. Bring the hostages home. I'm also working around the clock for more than just one ceasefire. I'm working to bring the region together. I'm working to build a lasting, durable peace. But the question is, and you see what's going on in Israel today, what after? What after Hamas?
Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, has been sworn into office in Taipei. He succeeds Tsai Ing-wen, who vehemently rejected China's claims that Taiwan is part of its territory. The incoming president is also a staunch defender of the island's democracy, though he has recently toned down his rhetoric and vowed to maintain the status quo. Yan Kamazan-Brumbi was at the ceremony in Taipei.
An unprecedented third term for the Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, here in Taiwan. An inauguration ceremony that will be attended by delegations from Europe as well as delegations from the United States. Joe Biden has sent an unofficial delegation. Why is it unofficial? Well, Biden knows that if he were to send an official delegation, that would anger Beijing. Beijing, of course, claims sovereignty over Taiwan. Beijing, for themselves, are not happy with the election of this president. They view him as a separatist. They've said so themselves for some comments that he made years ago, claiming that he was a pragmatic worker for Taiwanese independence. He's since rode back on those claims, and he's seeking to tread the path of the outgoing president Tsai Ing-wen, who's had a much more nuanced, a much more pragmatic foreign policy between Taiwan and China. Some of the challenges that will be facing William Lai as he enters office will be how to manage that relationship with Beijing, that relationship that has become more and more tense in recent years. He will also have to manage an economy, a domestic economy, that young people say many of them are being failed by. House prices here are very expensive, wages for young people often stagnant, and people say they can't afford to buy a home. One other issue is that the DPP, William Lai's party, lost their majority in the parliament. There have been clashes, physical clashes, altercations, fistfights even in the parliament in recent days as the opposition tried to push through legislation that the DPP is not proud of or not happy with. But that being said, thousands of people will be turning up here to watch this presidential inauguration today, cheering on their new president who will be running Taiwan for the next few years.
France has sent in more police reinforcements to the Pacific Ocean territory of New Caledonia. Security forces are trying to regain control of a key road on the main island in a bid to re-establish order after a week of unrest. Riots began last Monday over a proposed voting reform that will diminish the voice of the indigenous Kanak population. Shirley Sipon tells us more.
This is what RT1, the road crossing the main island of New Caledonia, looked like on Sunday. After 6 days of violence with barricades blocking traffic, including to the international airport, French police and military forces removed the rioters. Hundreds of officers were flown over from metropolitan France. French authorities say they have restored Republican order, releasing images of trucks removing charred cars and various objects from the road, and of police officers patrolling Nouméa, the capital. The archipelago's residents have long been divided on whether New Caledonia should remain part of France, being more autonomous, or fully independent. Those backing independence are mostly part of the indigenous communities, which represent only 39% of the overall population. What sparked the latest violence was the French authorities' plan to impose new voting rules, which would grant voting rights to thousands of new non-indigenous residents. This would automatically diminish the weight of the indigenous community and ruin its hopes to get independence through a democratic vote. On Sunday, as roads and barricades were cleared, people rushed to stores to get groceries after days of being holed up in their neighborhoods.
Next up, far-right European leaders have held a rally in Madrid ahead of next month's EU parliamentary elections. Polls suggest the vote will result in huge gains for the far right. France's Marine Le Pen and the Prime Ministers of Italy and Hungary, Giorgia Meloni and Viktor Orban, were among the speakers, but the limelight was hogged by special guest Javier Milei, Argentina's president, who denounced socialism as satanic. It also sparked a diplomatic incident when he called the wife of Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez corrupt. Madrid has recalled its ambassador to Buenos Aires. In Georgia, protests against the law on foreign influence continue nearly a week after Parliament gave its final approval. The law requires NGOs and media groups, which receive over a fifth of funding from abroad, to register as foreign agents. Critics say it resembles Russian legislation used by the Kremlin to crush dissent. Eliza Herbert has this update.
With Georgian and EU flags in hand, these demonstrators resemble those around them outside the Tbilisi parliament. But they have a point of difference. They are Russians exiled in the country, standing alongside Georgians.
All those horrors happening in Russia might happen here if the law is enacted. As a Russian citizen, I think it is important to show my solidarity.
They are protesting the foreign influence law passed by Parliament this week, which would require organisations financed from abroad to register with the authorities. For many Russians in Georgia, it reminds them of a similar law passed in their home country in 2012 that led to the closure of non-government organisations and independent media.
I saw how my country slowly slipped into dictatorship, how the screws were gradually tightened. And when I read the government's words and realized its motives, I understood that the Russian scenario is repeating. The worst thing is that the motives are the same.
But their solidarity doesn't prevent tensions arising. In Tbilisi, there is graffiti calling on Russians to go home. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Georgia has seen an influx of refugees fleeing military mobilization. Now, more than 100,000 Russians are currently in the country.
Next up, more than 60 years after he was selected as the first black astronaut, Ed Dwight has now become the oldest man in space at 90 years of age. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' space company Blue Origin on Sunday launched a 6-person crew from Texas to the edge of space and back. Dwight was handpicked by former US President John Kennedy in 1961 to train as an astronaut, but until now had never actually flown into space. Upon his return, he said it was a long time coming and that he was ecstatic. And finally, Pride season is getting into full swing with the Long Beach Parade kicking off on Sunday in California. Thousands of spectators lined the street for this 41st edition, watching the colourful floats, motorcycles and marches. And this year the city went all out, spending $80,000 on the parade. So let's make the most of it all and leave you with these colourful images. Stay with us here on France 24. $1,000 on the parade. So let's make the most of it all and leave you with these colourful images. Stay with us here on France 24.
Welcome to Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and this week, an historic investment in the country's well-being or a mistimed election gamble, a new law laying the groundwork for the introduction of universal healthcare in South Africa both excites and divides. Also, EdTech has the potential to close education gaps in DR Congo. The Africa Tick digital learning portal is going down well with kids who've been using it so far, but founders of the startup struggle to attract the investment they need to scale up their impact. And Tunisian boxer Khouloud Al-Halimi is hoping to hit the Paris Olympics hard as she battles her way towards the games. She's not only going for gold, but wrestling her way into the history books as the first Tunisian woman to medal is also one of her goals. But first, South Africa has moved a step closer to bringing in universal healthcare. After years of debate and consultation, President Cyril
Kasi kupu-kupu ini akan hilang suatu saat.
This is Asia Now.
Good morning. It is 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 8:30 in New Delhi, 10 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Yasmin Yonkers. At this hour, William Lai is sworn in as Taiwan's 6th democratically elected president. We check in on his inaugural speech, which is expected to express goodwill toward China and pledge to maintain the status quo. The fifth phase begins in Indian polling, where many national leaders contest high-profile seats. Voters will cast their ballots in 49 constituencies across 8 states and federally governed territories. And domestic and international search teams deployed in challenging weather, seeking Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, whose chopper convoy reportedly crash-landed in heavy fog. The country's Red Crescent chief has confirmed the helicopter's been found and the situation, quote, is not good. So William Lai has been sworn in as Taiwan's new president, and the outgoing vice president of 4 years takes over from the former president herself, Tsai Ing-wen. And this shift in power comes in the face of increasing diplomatic and military pressure from China, which claims the self-ruled island is part of its territory. Tensions between Mr. Lai and the Chinese government have been on the rise. China's voiced opposition against the incoming president, calling him a troublemaker and, quote, dangerous separatist. Mr. Lai's calls to hold talks with Beijing have been rejected by the mainland, and still senior officials say Mr. Lai will pledge to maintain the status quo with China. They say he will express goodwill towards Beijing and call for both sides to pursue peace in his inauguration speech. And that speech is happening right now. Okay, Mr. Lai's inauguration has been marred with protests and chaotic brawls in Parliament in the days leading up to the ceremony. Hundreds of opposition supporters rallied yesterday to protest 4 more years of Democratic Progressive Party rule. They claim the DPP's not lived up to its promises in the last 8 years in power. And Raymond Kuo at Rand Corporation explains how different William Lai is expected to be from his predecessor.
I think he's going to be Tsai version 2.0. I mean, during the election campaign, pretty much every single presidential candidate said that
independence. The image has stuck with him ever since and prompted Beijing to brand him as a dangerous separatist.
Well, polling is underway for the 5th phase of general elections in India, with the world's largest democratic exercise now entering its final stages. While it's the smallest of all 7 phases, some of the seats polling today are significant. Votes are being cast in 49 constituencies across 8 states and federally governed territories. The western state of Maharashtra completes its polling today. Julie Yu has more.
13 seats in the state are up for grabs. That includes 10 in India's financial capital, Mumbai.
Look like, but we will find that out in a few weeks' time.
The helicopter carrying Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has been found. The chief of Iran's Red Crescent was quoted as saying the situation was not good. Iran state television said there was no sign of life among passengers of that helicopter. State media earlier said that the chopper made a hard landing as it crossed a mountain terrain in heavy fog, and recovery efforts are underway, but the operation is reportedly hampered by bad weather. State media says rescuers have narrowed down the search area after detecting signals from the helicopter and a mobile phone of a flight crew member. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has assured there will be no disruption to state affairs.
خداوند متعال به سلامتی کامل رئیس جمهور عزیزم
potential political stability and what it could happen.
Well, your Asia Business Update is next with Olivia Marzuki. So Thailand's economy doing better than expected in the first quarter, Olivia?
Yes, Yasmin. First quarter GDP slowed, but still beat estimates. We'll look at what had driven the nation's growth. And later, Chinese property stocks are losing ground despite the measures to stabilize the sector unveiled last Friday.
Severe weather has been pummeling parts of the world, with flash floods and heat waves recorded in sub-Saharan Africa, Europe, and several countries in Asia. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, heavy rains and flash floods have affected nearly 1 million people in East Africa, including over 300,000 displaced in Kenya, Somalia, Burundi, and Tanzania. On Saturday, flash floods from heavy seasonal rains in western Afghanistan left at least 50 people dead. Authorities have warned the death toll may rise as dozens of people remain missing. The exceptionally heavy rains there have killed more than 300 people and destroyed thousands of houses. Moving across the Atlantic, Europe is facing its own weather crisis. In southwest of Germany, heavy rainfall, particularly in the Saarland, led to flooding, impacting many houses and cars, and warranting some evacuations in Liebach on Saturday. The fire department prepared its boats and distributed sandbags to protect houses amid the floods. Authorities have warned the rain will continue into the night and on Sunday. Meanwhile, in Russia, over 2,000 people have been evacuated from the Omsk after flooding affected over 200 homes, according to the Russian Emergency Ministry. While in South Asia, climate experts say extreme heat during the pre-monsoon season is becoming more frequent. On Saturday, parts of northwest India sweltered under scorching temperatures. There is, however, some glimmer of hope. Scientists say the powerful El Nino weather event, which along with climate change has helped push global temperatures to new highs, has ended, but also warned that the month after the end of El Nino will give a strong indication as to whether the recent high temperatures are due to accelerated climate change or not. 99.8 users in Ghana aged between 16 to 64 years owned a mobile phone of any type in 2023, according to data. This vegetable farmer, Cyril Fianyo, being one of them in a village in the Volta region, believes his business has the opportunity to expand now that he's able to use the internet on his phone.
I like searching on the phone so much, on phone so much. So when I got it, I saw this phone is very smart. So I don't find it difficult to get some information that I want.
Access to mobile internet is driving economic development in Africa, but the cost of buying the phone and data is still a major obstacle. One mobile company called Unity Networks in Ghana says it has a plan to close the digital gap. Though Unity Networks aims to reach low-income populations, the importance of mobile internet and apps to carrying out business in Ghana stretches across the socio-economic spectrum. Both farmers and traders are now relying more on smart apps for their business.
I actually get my orders from Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, WhatsApp, and a normal text message. And without internet, you will not be able to get all these assets. So I think having a mobile phone and a smartphone and internet, you can be able to work.
85% of the sub-Saharan region is covered by networks, according to the mobile lobby group GSMA.
Today, police are treating the death of a 38-year-old man and his 2-year-old son in Lismore as a potential murder-suicide. As New South Wales police arrest more than 550 people in a crackdown on domestic violence offenders. Iran state media reports the wreckage of a helicopter carrying the president has been found. And the corporate watchdog tells banks they need to do more to help customers struggling with their finances. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ross Childs. Police have found the bodies of a 38-year-old man and a 2-year-old boy at a house on the New South Wales far north coast. The ABC understands the man was the subject of an apprehended violence order protecting the mother of the child. Reporter Emma Rennie has the details from Lismore.
Hi Ros, we know that police were called to this small block of units in East Lismore at about
Respect, which is 1800 737 732. A man charged with trying to murder a policeman in a stabbing attack in the Sydney CBD has had his matter heard in court. The police officer has been released from hospital after suffering stab wounds and skull fractures from the attack. Reporter Isabel Rowe has more from outside the court in Sydney.
Well, Ros, this all unfolded yesterday afternoon at around 1 o'clock in the centre of Sydney CBD. Police say that there were a bunch of officers doing their routine traffic checks.
More than 550 arrests have been made in New South Wales as part of a sweeping police operation targeting domestic and family violence offenders. The 4-day blitz began on Wednesday last week and ran into Saturday. And police laid more than 1,000 charges, with around half of those arrested wanted for serious offences. Reporter Chantal Alcuri is in Sydney and joined us now. Hi Chantal, so what can you tell us about this operation and what it found?
This is just the tip of the iceberg of this issue.
Chantal, thank you. More on our developing news out of Iran now. Iranian state media is reporting that search and rescue teams have found the wreckage of a helicopter that was carrying President Ibrahim Raisi, and there are no signs of life. The head of Iran's Red Crescent has reportedly described the situation as not good, and an Iranian official has told the Reuters news agency that expectations are low for the president to be alive. The president and his foreign minister were flying back from the country's border with Azerbaijan when the helicopter went missing in foggy conditions. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has urged Iranians to pray for those on board.
Of course, we should pray and pray for the health of this group of servicemen, at the head of which is the respected...
Day across it during the afternoon, and we'll bring you more details a little later this hour. The Prime Minister says the Defence Force is on standby to fly to New Caledonia to help restore order in the country. But Noumea Airport remains closed, and there's no time frame for when it will reopen. 6 people have been killed during days of violence in the French territory, prompted by changes to voting rights. The Australian government is aware of about 300 Australians that remain there. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says French authorities have been providing regular updates about the situation.
The situation is really concerning. We're doing everything possible to help Australians who are on the ground. There are 300 registered as well, so that those who wish to leave can do so.
Taiwan's new president has been sworn into office 4 months after the ruling party was elected for an unprecedented third term. William Lai will face numerous challenges at home and across the Taiwan Strait. East Asia correspondent Kathleen Calderwood is in Taipei.
Thousands are here to witness the inauguration of Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, also known as William Lai. Now,
Kathleen Calderwood reporting that. The legal team for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange says he could soon be on a plane bound for the United States, with a crucial court decision expected in London on Monday. The British High Court is due to give a final decision on whether he can be extradited to the United States over a mass leak of secret US documents, which could be the culmination of 13 years of legal battles and detentions. 2 judges are set to rule on US assurances that the 52-year-old will not face the death penalty and could cite the First Amendment right to free speech there if he faces a US trial for spying. American rapper Sean Diddy Combs has apologised days after Vision was released, showing him assaulting his then-girlfriend. In a video apology, Combs said he was truly sorry and disgusted by his actions. North America correspondent Barbara Miller compiles this report, and a warning: this story contains distressing content.
The rapper Diddy lays down at the feet of his then-girlfriend. Detailed in civil lawsuits were meritless, claims that could now be revised in light of the developments of the past few days. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Washington.
Australia's corporate watchdog says the major banks aren't doing enough to help borrowers who are having trouble repaying their loans. The number of people in strife is rising due to high interest rates, rocketing rents and the increasing cost of living. But ASIC says more than 1/3 of people seeking assistance drop out of the process because it's so difficult to get help. Well, it found customers were often required to repeat their stories multiple times to different people, with some lenders having onerous requests for documents that aren't relevant to lending. Many banks didn't follow up, meaning some applicants were denied help because customers didn't know the bank was waiting for information from them. But those who actually did end up getting help were able to secure things like a reduction or deferral of payments, although ASIC's figures show 40% fell into arrears right after the assistance period ended. The banks have responded to the findings, with the Australian Banking Association Chair Anna Bligh saying, quote, banks have long-standing arrangements in place to support people facing financial difficulty, including highly experienced and dedicated hardship teams ready to help customers. In any organisation, there is always room for improvement. Banks will consider these findings and work with ASIC on any further ways to support customers. ASIC Commissioner Alan Kirkland says he's incredibly disappointed in the findings.
In some cases, it was clear to us that there's not enough resourcing going into the specialist teams that assist. In other cases, it seemed that banks hadn't really thought about their processes from a consumer perspective, so training, better resourcing, and really puts their staff in a situation where they understand what the individual customer is asking for. So to recognise a call for help at the first opportunity, listen to the individual customer's story, and tailor assistance to their circumstances, because every customer is different, and we want every bank to understand that and respond appropriately.
Student protesters at La Trobe University in Melbourne have ignored a directive to pack up their pro-Palestinian protest camp, with a 48-hour deadline passing overnight. And the central building at the University of Melbourne remains closed after protesters spent a fifth night camped inside. Reporter Simon Vance is there.
Protesters inside this building have been handed a directive to pack up their property and leave the premises. They have been warned if they don't, they are trespassing, and Victoria Police. As for whether police will be called here to the university, well, the students have been told that could happen, but we'll just have to wait and see.
New research has been published into the first COVID-19 vaccine, AstraZeneca, and its links to blood clotting. This was a major talking point around the rollout of the vaccine and had some people quite worried about its side effects. ABC Science journalist Higgin Taylor takes us through the research.
Well, what they noticed, and you might remember at the time of the vaccine rollout, that there was this concern, as you say, about real but very rare blood clotting disorder that was happening in some people who had AstraZeneca.
I'll report later today at 3 o'clock Eastern on RN. Higgin, thanks so much.
Thanks, Rod.
Indigenous advocates say governments are missing out on a huge opportunity to tackle youth crime in WA's far north. Those running programs that make a difference to young people's lives say a flawed funding system is getting in the way of real progress.
Out on country, looking for crabs.
In Perth and in Darwin. You can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. Here are the top stories on ABC News. Iranian state media is reporting that search and rescue teams have found the wreckage of a helicopter that was carrying President Ibrahim Raisi, and there are no signs of lockdown. Police say they're treating the discovery of the bodies of a man and a toddler in East Lismore yesterday as a potential murder-suicide. Officers were called to an apartment for a welfare check after the boy failed to return from an access visit. Bodies were found after officers forced their way in. ABC understands the man was the subject of an apprehended violence order protecting the mother of the child. More than 550 people have been arrested during a 4-day police crackdown on domestic and family violence offenders in New South Wales. Police say those arrested are facing more than 1,000 charges, including breaching bail and apprehended violence orders. And Australia's corporate watchdog says the major banks aren't doing enough to help borrowers who are having trouble repaying their loans. The number of people in strife is rising due to high interest rates, rocketing rents and increases in the cost of living. ASIC says mortgage hardship notices over the final 3 months of 2023 were 54% higher than the same period a year earlier. The head of the Red Crescent in Iran has told state media that the wreckage of the helicopter, which was carrying Iran's president and foreign minister, has been found and has described the situation as not good. Former Al Jazeera Iran correspondent Soraya Lenny says the topography of the region has hampered rescue efforts.
Well, the president's a very controversial figure. He always has been.
That's all news for today. Thank you for watching. I'm Shakil 5858. I'm Amir Budnam. Take care of yourself and have a good life.